Hi, I'm Abby, I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If deep dives aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. Do you like Blind Faith? Do you like that I cannot escape this album's clutches? Oh god,
Blind Faith is a groovy group.
Oh, for the love of God! Then you will love my conversation with Chris of the Gen X Muse about Blind Faith's one and only LP. For better or for worse, Clapton's music is the Abigail DeVoe brand. Whatever that is. Blind Faith was one of the first episodes to really kick off, and at this point, it's so big, it's kind of unreducible. We had a great rambly chat about the Eric Clapton extended cinematic universe. Thank you, Chris, for giving me the opportunity to revisit this album. That is linked in the description for your listening pleasure, as well as the new Dolls Pod episode. This was Emma's belated birthday episode, so go wish her a happy belated birthday. She wrote about her birthday twin, Janis Joplin. Emma taught me so much about Janis that I didn't know. This is an episode with a lot of heart and soul. Janis was such a sweetheart. You can listen to the Dolls Pod wherever you stream your podcast, but as always, Apple and Spotify are linked in the description. Speaking of celebrating birthdays and reduxes, February is a very active month on this channel, but if I bump this album back to March, I will literally never hear the end of it. I know no one's gonna complain about me bumping it ahead, so this week we're celebrating the earlyeth. This week we're celebrating the early 50th anniversary of Led Zeppelin, Physical Graffiti. Congrats if you guessed this one. If you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post hints to what the next album is gonna be, I make announcements, I host polls. You can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written version of the reviews on my website. Alright, let's take the plastic off. Ugh. So much better. I'm pretty sure my copy is a repress. I do have the 1975 date on all of my labels and my back cover, but that's no matter. Let's talk about the main attraction, this cover art. This die-cut sleeve, designed by Peter Corriston, features a photograph of 96 and 98 St. Mark's Place in the East Village. A few years later, the Stones would film the video for Waiting on a Friend here. Nowadays, there's a tea house in the building called Physical Graffiti. On the inner sleeves and insert, as B-roll Abby will be showing you, I'm sure, we have our album title, credits, and some famous faces in the windows, including Flash Gordon, Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra, King Kong, Buzz Aldrin, the Virgin Mary, Pope Leo XIII, Laurel and Hardy, Charles Atlas, Lee Harvey Oswald, Zeppelin manager Peter Grant, and Led Zeppelin in drag. You'll only see it here, folks. The die-cut windows mean you can rearrange the images however you like. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure cover. Due to that pesky complete artistic control clause, Atlantic Records were contractually obligated to execute Zeppelin's crazy ideas, including Physical Graffiti, which was reportedly the most expensive album cover ever made at the time. Manufacturing this whole ordeal delayed the album's release by 3 whole months. When asked what the holdup was, Plant reportedly said, "It's the windows. We're having trouble with our windows." On Physical Graffiti, who do we have? Led Bloody Zeppelin, that's who. Robert Plant on vocals and a harmonica solo on Custard Pie. Jimmy Page on guitar. slide and steel guitar, John Paul Jones on bass, keys, mandolin, some guitar and synths, and John Bonham on drums. Our special guest is honorary 6th member of the Rolling Stones, Ian Stewart. He plays piano on the aptly titled Boogie with Stu. Physical Graffiti was produced by Jimmy Page, engineered by Andy Johns, Eddie Kramer, George Chicance, Keith Harwood, and Ron Nevison. Roll transition. Zeppelin doesn't make my job easy. Not only is this yet another entry in the 90-minute double album club, not only do all of the publications I normally use in the World Radio History Archive suddenly drop off in the 70s, there is no truly good Zeppelin biography.
Hammer of the Gods this, Hammer of the Gods that.
Hammer of the Gods' biggest claim to fame is a farce. Yeah, that's right. The Mudshark story? It wasn't Zeppelin. It was their tour manager, Richard Cole, and fucking Carmine Appice. How do I know that? Bob Spitz's Zeppelin biography, which is also riddled with holes, as we'll see later in this episode. In the end, I went with Trampled Underfoot, which of course you can't find in the United States. God bless the Internet Archive. I'm also working from Brad Talinsky's Light and Shade, which are direct accounts from Jimmy Page. At the height of their fame, Led Zeppelin wasn't just a band. It was a living, breathing ecosystem with an entourage the size of a small city, home base at the infamous Riot House, and a whole-ass private jet. Before the whole-ass private jet, there was Broneraar in 1970. There, Zeppelin recorded the black sheep of their self-titled albums, Led Zeppelin 3. The ode to their vacation spot didn't make the cut, though. The Rover dates back to around this time as well. Next came Headley Grange in 1971. Zeppelin recorded a whole album for the express purpose of sticking it to the critics who said they were nothing but hype. The music will speak for itself. There will be no explanation, there will just be... 2 songs were left over from Headley Grange, Night Flight and Boogie with Stu, and a 3rd song down by the seaside left over from Sessions in London. Then came Houses of the Holy in 73. Recorded at Stargroves, Black Country Woman, an attempt to record the Rover, and, for reasons beyond me, the title track were left off. Through all these cycles, Zeppelin carried out their meteoric rise. There was just one problem, though. Their strongest asset is actively going to shit. Since my last time around with Physical Graffiti, I've gotten into collecting Zeppelin bootlegs. So I've heard the Golden Gods' vocal decline as it happened. At some point on that European tour for Zeppelin 3, Plant strained his voice, then got laryngitis. He recovered all right, but on the tour in support of 4, he pushed his voice too hard too early on. Touring is all about endurance, and Plant had spent his. Run down from Zeppelin's insane schedule, he got sick. Again. So when you speak or sing normally, your vocal cords will do something like this, a nice, soft, non-stressful motion. That gentle rub together is part of what makes the sound of our voices. Now, what happens when you're sick and you cough a lot? Your vocal cords get a gap in them. That's why you sound so hoarse and wheezy. When you sing through that, you force the gap together, like when you belt. That can be extremely harmful. Plant started avoiding high notes in 72, but the damage was already done.
Hey, hey, mama said the way you move gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove. Hey, mama said the way you move gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove.
Even the newer songs, like Over the Hills and Far Away, were giving him trouble. Upon listening back to the Houses of the Holy tapes, Plant sounded noticeably different. He lacked the body he had in his chest voice on 3 and 4, and his range is shrinking. They used some weird vari-speed stuff in hopes of camouflaging what was going on, but repeated strain and illness were doing irreparable damage to Plant's voice. This is from the San Francisco show on June 2nd, 1973. Persistence is an appropriate title because holy hell, Plant is persisting. When tour concluded noted in July, Plant had surgery to remove the nodes. Zeppelin is forced to take the longest break in their career thus far while he recovers. Page was totally bereft. Quote, "When I came back from the last tour, I didn't know where I was. I didn't even know where I was going. We ended up in New York, and the only thing that I could relate to was the instrument on stage. I was just totally and completely spaced out." He side quests a little, scoring Kenneth Anger's Lucifer Rising, but they have a falling out. In early '74, Zeppelin reconvenes on Headley Grange. But this time around, the Rolling Stones mobile wasn't available. After hearing The Who's Quadrophenia and being really impressed, Jimmy called up newbie engineer Ron Nevison. Coincidentally, he'd just built a mobile unit. Engineer Benji Lefebvre is brought on too. He's got some new tech that'll help with Plant's post-op voice. It, quote, "would become a chorus of 10 voices because I could feed things back into themselves. And then we had this harmonizer with an actual keyboard so I could make his voice sing chords. It was fantastic fun." The crew stayed in a swanky hotel while Jimmy and Ron held down the fort at Headley Grange. As so eloquently put by Richard Cole, Jimmy was, quote, "quite happy in that fucking horrible cold house." As this was familiar turf, the guys settled into routine quickly. Everyone would descend upon the house at around 1 o'clock or whenever Jimmy decided to emerge from his crypt, then work until 1 a.m. Biographer Paul Rees alleges they only needed 2 or 3 takes per song. Ron is more reasonable, saying it was more like 6 to 8. Maybe they worked too efficiently, no doubt fueled by the ungodly amount of substances in Zeppelin's circle. The guys brought farm animals inside. They shot flares out the windows. According to Benji, production halted for weeks after Peppy the Roadie crashed Bonzo's brand new BMW. Quote, "Bonzo was so upset about his pride and joy that he wanted to kill Peppy, who hid in a wardrobe for 36 hours. I don't blame him. Angry Bonzo sounds terrifying." Ron soon cried uncle, and for his sake and the band, moved out of Headley Grange. Quote, "In the end, they agreed with me because they knew they were a little insane." A little? They reportedly left Headley Grange in such bad shape it was damn near inhospitable for Genesis. Zeppelin got 8 tracks out of Headley Grange this time. Custard Pie, a recording of In My Time of Dying, Trampled Underfoot, Kashmir, In the Light, 10 Years Gone, The Wanton Song, and Sick Again. Like 4, Jimmy put on the finishing touches in London. There was just one issue. These 8 tracks clock in at 44 minutes and 51 seconds. A standard LP is 40-ish minutes, that's fine. But no sequencing could put 25 minutes of music on each side of a record. It couldn't be done without editing some songs down. In My Time of Dying and Kashmir were most problematic, but Zeppelin refused to touch either one. But of course, this isn't enough for a double album either, and Zeppelin were too busy to go back to Headley Grange and write more. Why were they so busy? Their 5-year contract with Atlantic was up for renewal. Instead of just signing again, Peter Grant did some negotiating and landed Zeppelin their own subsidiary. This became Swan Song. Though they boasted the likes of Bad Company and The Pretty Things, it was kind of an Apple Records situation with way more drugs. Plant was involved in the creative side some, but everybody else was happy to leave the business to whoever. No one knew how to run a label, and as a result, Swan Song missed out on 2 acts that would have been huge for them. Heart and motherfucking Queen. Then there was The Song Remains the Same, which was stuck in production hell for like 4 years. I'm gonna keep it short because I'm sure there will be a whole video on this in the future. The Royal Albert Hall footage from 1970 they were supposed to use was outdated and therefore scrapped. Madison Square Garden was filmed instead, but director Joe Massot f***ed up and didn't film entire chunks of songs. He got fired, Peter Clifton is brought on, he stuck the band on a soundstage and just had them mime the performance. Jimmy's side questing again. He records Scarlet with Rolling Stone Keith Richards, future Rolling Stone Ronnie Wood, and Rick Gretsch of Oh, thank God. Scheduling conflicts abound. Zeppelin were in a tight spot with this new album. But Jimmy had an idea. Quote, "We had enough material for 1.5 LPs, so we figured, let's put out a double and use some of the material we had done previously but never released. It seemed like a good time to do that sort of thing." The new double album was mixed in July by Keith Harwood. A November 29th, 1974 release date was announced. Cue the windows. During that delay, Zeppelin hunkered down in an old movie theater in Ealing to rehearse for their 10th US tour. Phil Carson told the story of Atlantic exec Ahmet Erdogan stopping by. Quote, "Led Zeppelin weren't exactly a quiet band. They do a couple songs and Ahmet is sitting there bopping away, but in a loud moment, Robert looks around and sees that Ahmet has gone to sleep. They put the mic by him and gradually turned it louder until it was his own snoring that woke him up." The track listing of Physical Graffiti goes as follows. Opening up disc 1, we have Custard Pie, followed by The Rover, and closing side 1 is In My Time of Dying. Opening up side 2, we have Houses of the Holy, then Trampled Underfoot, and disc 1 is closed with Kashmir. Opening up disc 2, we have In the Light, followed by Bronnerar, then Down by the Seaside, and side 3 closes with 10 Years Gone. Opening up side 4, we have Night Flight, followed by The Wanton Song, then Boogie with Stu, next Black Country Woman, and the album closes with Sick Again. Physical Graffiti was released February 24th, 1975, 49 years, 11 months, and 3 days ago today. Happy early birthday. The hype was insane. As far as the public knew, Zeppelin had been radio silent for over a year, and fans had reason to wait with bated breath. This wasn't the 60s anymore. Everyone who is anyone has done a double album. The Stones set the high water mark with Exile. The Who did it twice to varying degrees of success. Yes, we're eaten alive for Topographic Oceans. At this stage, a double album could either make or break your career. When it finally did arrive, it predictably debuted at number 3 on the Billboard album charts and hit number 1 soon after. But it didn't hit number 1 in the UK until well into March. Bob Dylan's comeback, Blood on the Tracks, also delayed from late 1974, firmly held that spot. Now this is amazing. All of Zeppelin's back catalog re-entered the charts with Physical Graffiti. According to Plant in interview in 75, it's because all their music exists in the same sonic universe.
As diverse as the first album is from the second, and the second from the third, and the third from the fourth, and the fourth to Houses of the Holy, and Houses of the Holy again to Physical Graffiti, there is, dare I use one of Jimmy's terms, we should probably spin off into the whirling vortex.
Nick Kent's review for the NME is paywalled to shit. The issue it's in is also conspicuously missing from the World Radio History Archive. You probably already know some of the more famous quotes. One thing's for sure. For sheer, sustained oral ferocity, Physical Graffiti can eat Houses of the Holy for breakfast. I could access Jim Miller's review for Rolling Stone just fine, though. He pointed out the steep competition presented to Zeppelin by the last few years of the Stones and the Who's output. They were all contenders for Greatest Rock Band. Quote, "This 2-record set, the product of almost 2 years' labor, is the band's Tommy, Beggar's Banquet, and Sgt. Pepper rolled into one. Physical Graffiti is Led Zeppelin's bid for artistic respectability." While according to him, they lacked in lyrical prowess, longer cuts like In the Light and In My Time of Dying fell victim to monotony. The track listing covered blues, hard rock, funk, old school rock and roll, and, quote, "come heavy ballad." In the Light. Jim identifies the plant wasn't operating at full capacity. The Rover suffered from his weakened Houses of the Holy state, but he made up for his shortcomings just fine with his expression. Jim also does the whole Jimmy Page is a genius thing, despite his shortcomings. Quote, "His playing lacks the lyricism of Eric Clapton." the funk of Jimi Hendrix, the rhythmic flair of Peter Townsend. But of all the virtuoso guitarists of the 60s, Page, along with Hendrix, has most expanded the instrument's sonic vocabulary. That much remains true today. While naysayers ragged on Physical Graffiti for being lazy, it's half old material, I don't blame them, the tour did not disappoint. It included some serious upgrades, including a huge video screen, a laser show, something to the tune of 70,000 watts of amps. Holy fuck. Since money was no object to Zeppelin, they could afford to airlift their whole stage to England. The screen alone cost £10,000, nearly $94,000 in today's money. I don't even want to think about the rest. And we can't forget the introduction of Jimmy Page's iconic dragon suits. Their first gig cancellation in 7 years happened when the city of Boston refused to issue a license, triggering a riot. Do not piss off Bostonians. They have a history of dumping tea in the harbor. And a second gig in Miami was canceled when promoters hadn't paid for the West Palm Beach Speedway's parking lot. Oops. I want to quickly visit another Nick Kent piece for the NME. I think you'll find it interesting. About rumors of feuds with The Who and the Stones. Quote, "This, after all, has been something of an Achilles heel for Zeppelin." Like almost all of their other records, Physical Graffiti has been thoroughly ingrained in pop culture. It's been many years now, but I think the NFL used Kashmir. Of course, it's been on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list. The 2003 edition ranked it at number 70, 4 spots below 4 and 5 above 2. It slipped to number 144 by 2024. Quote, "This last great Led Zeppelin album is, like most double LPs of the era, a bloated beast, but its self-indulgent swagger is the very thing that makes it so much fun, and one of the heaviest records of the 1970s. As for Jimmy, he thinks of Physical Graffiti quite clinically. He views it, quote, as a document of the band in a working environment. Some people have said that part of it's are sloppy, but I think that this album is really honest. It is a more personal album, and I think it allowed the listener to enter our world. You know, here's the door. I'm in. Wait. Going in. My feelings towards Physical Graffiti have, I wouldn't say cooled since last evaluating it, but they've definitely matured. Being 2 more years removed from my Zeppelin phase, I look at their stuff with a more critical eye, or listen with a more critical ear, I guess. Call it cynicism, but I see Zeppelin more as a business than a band, especially in this era. They found their niche, perfected it, and capitalized on it so hard that the guys are living in literal castles surrounded by priceless art in their old age. There's nothing more commercial than putting out a double album at the height of your career. It's rock and roll cliche at this point. Physical Graffiti does have its quirks, though. It's not your standard model hot off the assembly line. You can tell which cuts came from which era just by listening to Plant's voice. He's full and rich on the 4 era cuts, wacky, very speeded on Houses of the Holy outtakes, and thin sounding post-surgery. While Planty wasn't in top form, I gotta say I am very impressed with him pulling some of these performances out of the bag less than 6 months post-op. Though the custard pie riff does start at the beginning, it doesn't feel like it does. We start with the tangled ball of yarn instead of the short, straight tail at the end. Then the grimy organ follows. You'll notice JPJ and Bonzo rarely do the same thing. It's usually Jimmy and JPJ linking up. That's very unusual for a rock band, where the bass and drums usually do the same thing, and the singer and the guitar usually do the same thing. Our ears follow a broken loop on that riff. Circular motion has been used by rock music since we were in loincloths dancing around a fire. It works for a reason. It triggers our deepest human instincts. But starting with, while my mama allowed me to fool around all night long, the guys add this crazy syncopation, skidding the loop to a stop. It throws an elbow and an angle in. it squares the circle. This repeats on the third line of every verse and the fourth with a really quick key change thrown in. It perks our ear up and refreshes the broken circle. Combine that with Bonzo constantly changing which beat gets the emphasis on each measure, and this is the least 4/4 song that is in 4/4 that I've ever heard. Zeppelin were all about crazy time signatures, as we'll see later. They weren't afraid to throw the standards all out of whack. This is such an indulgent D-gaff solo from Jimmy. It just cranks itself out until it bothers to get to a melody. It's perfect for such an unabashedly sexual song. As far as lyrics go, there are few things less sexy than chewing on anything. Bob Spitz's book erroneously attributes the custard pie lyrics to Drop Down Mama.
Drop down, baby, let your daddy be.
While the drop down phrase is used a lot, it's more I want some of your pie.
Says I'm not joking, ain't gonna tell you no lie. I want a piece of your custard pie. You got.
But there's a verse in there that doesn't belong to some of your pie. Put on your nightshirt, mama, and your morning gown. You know by night I'm gonna shake 'em on down. Now, where have we heard that before? Hats off to goddamn Roy Harper with lyrics lifted from Shake 'em on Down.
Baby birthday, we gonna shake 'em on down.
Not only are Zeppelin referencing the blues on Physical Graffiti, they're referencing themselves. The Rover introduces Zeppelin's honorary fifth member for Physical Graffiti, that fucking Eventide phaser. The guys were obsessed with it. I don't know how to feel about it. This sound really dates Physical Graffiti. Jim Miller was right. Plant sounds especially thin here. Heavy effects on his vocal track hindered rather than helped. The star of the track is Jimmy. He was the riff king in this era. There's so many iconic Zeppelin riffs on this album alone, it's honestly stupid. This one is played with such brightness and attitude. My feelings have cooled significantly on In My Time of Dying since the last time I evaluated this album. It's the longest Zeppelin song, and I'm not sure it had to be. Achilles' Last Stand, the best Zeppelin song, is a minute shorter and uses its runtime to much greater effect. The languid guitar at the start of In My Time of Dying is intriguing, but this rendition loses its way a few times. It fumbles its momentum. The ending is endearing, but it feels mismatched to everything preceding it. Side 2 kicks off with Houses of the Holy and a searing hot metallic guitar effect, which is quite unusual for this era. The heavy effects wane as the song goes on, but that riff jolts you to life. Houses of the Holy is also unusual for... That's a fucking cowbell in there. What a delightful percussion instrument. It makes me laugh every time. Even if you'd recorded the Rover and this with a fully recovered Plant in 1974, you'd still know this was a Houses of the Holy era song from the lyrics. Plant was still in that Zeppelin 4 phase of using lots of hippie-like pastoral images. Those lyrics drag Houses of the Holy down. Killer as its sound is, having read this over, I understand why it didn't make the cut for the album. Don't think that Dove reference is lost on me. Trampled Underfoot is a lot beefier than I remember it being. Plant taps into his lower register, perhaps out of necessity, but to no less great effect.
I said I flash your lights, mama. Your horn won't even blow.
I can't count how many guitar tracks are in the mix. There's at least 2 playing the main motif, a third playing the harmony, a rhythm track akin to welding sparks, and the solos. That's at least 5 or 6. I've seen a lot of publications likening this song to funk, and I get why. Bonzo puts a strong emphasis on the downbeat. About In My Time of Dying, Jimmy said, "When you're playing like that, why would you want to stop? it might apply more to Trampled Underfoot. It goes on for over 5 minutes, not because it's particularly complex, it's a lot of car euphemisms and the same moos and babies as usual, with the same riff and a B section. It's the feel that matters. The tempo loses that funk rigidity through Jimmy's elastic, very phased, backwards echo solo over JPJ's little moment. The metronome, all are swept away by the feel. You will never see me count out JPJ. He was Zeppelin's secret weapon. He shines on Trampled Underfoot. He injects it with that feel. His minimalistic bass is a firm anchor while his keys play the role a bass normally would. You do not see Kashmir coming. There is no indication that Kashmir is coming. That's exactly how I want it, like some ancient civilization invading foreign land. All of Zeppelin knew this one was special as soon as they recorded it. Plant said it's his favorite in interview. I've read several accounts of Bonzo calling Peter Grant after they'd record it to drag him out to Headley Grange to hear it. Lyrically, it's a triumph. It fills the listener's head with swirling images of traversing the east. Oh, let the sun beat down upon my face, stars to fill my dreams. I am a traveler of both time and space to be where I have been. In his weakened state, Plant sounds like an elderly traveler praying to the gods to protect him so he may one day return. My Shangri-La beneath the summer moon, I will return again, sure as the dust that blows high in June when moving through Kashmir. This thing sounds huge. This is played in the same key as White Mountain / Black Mountainside. Dave Lewis likened the sound to a sitar. Kashmir is a smooshing together of cultures. Page and Plant went out to India to attempt to record Friends in 1970. JPJ wrote this orchestra part and recruited a Pakistani ensemble to play it because he knew they would get this time signature and this key right. This song is more connected to Zeppelin's trips to Morocco. Plant throws in these Middle Eastern vocal runs. And then there's the question of the polyrhythm. Bonzo plays in 4/4. You stack everyone else in 3/4 on top. They only meet up once every 12 measures. 3 times 4 equals 12. It's got a startling, exotic effect. The drum sound is huge. It was recorded in the same location as, and with the same mic setup as 4, and it still sounds like the march of 1,000 men. I maintain the best Kashmir is from Zeppelin's reunion in 2007. We may be down a Bonzo, but an aging Plant lost no ferocity, and it sounds like Page attended a seminar from the school of Tony Iommi. Though Kashmir is nothing short of an epic, it's in the light that captures me. It calls on gods much older. When you hear Jimmy's Lucifer Rising score, you will know exactly where In the Light came from. He's incorporated that esoteric feel and the more ambient, whacked out elements into a standard rock song. I am but a simple woman. When I hear Page take a bow to a guitar, I go, yeah! He's revived it from the Yardbirds days for an Indian drone effect. It's given a retro-futurism tinge with JPJ's synths. Then you have the chorus effect on Plant's voice thanks to Benji Lefebvre's equipment. It makes Plant sound like the Oracle, a vessel for the voice of the gods. Though I find it superior to Bronniar, I'm glad Bronniar was left off Zeppelin 3 because it gets to shine on Physical Graffiti. It's just 2 tracks of Jimmy playing in gold-spun finery. I miss the intricacy he played with in that era. I suspect this song was remixed for Physical Graffiti. There is no way the guys could have gotten this sound in 1970 unless they got a hold of that phaser way earlier than we thought they did. It's got a gorgeous waves on the water effect. Down by the Seaside has never been my favorite, but I suppose on an album centered around travel, it makes sense to have a beach song. This is very of its time. The steel guitar and watery effect is very California 1970/1971. Those guitars, the lazy river feel, and Plant's falsetto ooze remind me of something known Zeppelin muse Joni Mitchell or Neil Young would have done. Physical Graffiti has two apexes, fitting for an album split across two discs. Whereas Kashmir ambushes you, In the Light, Bronnerar, and Down by the Seaside build in anticipation for 10 Years Gone. Along with Tangerine, Rain Song, No Quarter, and Achilles, 10 Years Gone is one of the few Zeppelin songs I revisit in my casual listening. It's one of the most mature Zeppelin songs. Plant ditches all the innuendo to reminisce on lost love. Though this girl haunts him, vixen in my dreams, to great surprise to me, I never thought I'd see your face the way it used to be, and he wonders about her all the time. He's at peace with losing her. If she comes back someday, she comes back. If not, oh well. As the eagle leaves its nest, it's got so far to go. Changes fill my time, maybe that's alright with me. In the midst, I think of you and how it used to be. The care Jimmy poured into the instrumental is quite romantic as well. It makes 10 Years Gone feel even more like a handwritten letter or a grand gesture a la Layla. Jimmy used just about every tool in his box, every effect at his disposal. There's clean guitar, there's pedals, there's effects in post. The bridge section never fails to sweep me off my feet. Our narrator asks rhetorical questions as if it's the only way to address this woman without completely breaking down. Jimmy plays this fuzzed out riff with shimmering bursts. It's one of my favorite sides of a double album ever, right up there with side 4 of Layla and side 1 of Eat a Peach. If only the last quarter of Physical Graffiti could compare to this one. It all feels like something of an identity crisis. Night Flight, as shimmery, optimistic, and empowering as it may be, it doesn't feel like Zeppelin. It feels like Who's Next. And Boogie with Stu and Black Country Woman feel like Exile. Sure, since the Stones released Exile, other bands could get away with releasing similarly undone, unpretentious efforts. It's cool to see Zeppelin in this casual environment of Headley Grange the first time around. The Richie Valens reference is endearing.
Ooh, my head. Rub on it.
I appreciate that window into their inner world, but it feels disjointed from the sheer power we've heard on the first 3 sides. And then there's Sick Again. At some point between the GTOs and 1975, the term groupie and groupie culture in California changed. Sick Again is clear evidence, as is the Stones' Starfucker. In the 60s, groupies were young women around college age, loving music so much they wanted to be part of that world. They helped out whenever they could, they hung out with the groups, they provided a floor for the guys to crash on, and sometimes a bed. Sex was a side effect. If it happened, very 60s free love. These are groupies. These are children. There were no shortage of young women to go after at the height of Zeppelin's fame, so there really is no excuse. Shame on these guys for going after teenagers and setting a terrible example for decades of rock and roll to come. That's all I have to say about Sick Again. Wanton Song is the clear standout of side 4, though Chipmunk Plant drags it down. It possesses the same driving power Trampled Underfoot and Custard Pie did. The energy's a little more frantic. The guitar solo is straight up ugly. This is the undone that fits Zeppelin, and that's how you use a phaser. The underwhelming side 4 makes me question if Physical Graffiti had to be a double album. I see where critics came from. This is half old material. If they dropped In My Time of Dying, it would have been a positively brutal single album. But it wouldn't have had these lost tracks either, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. It also occurred to me that 1975 was the last year Zeppelin could have made Physical Graffiti. It was the year of big, lavish sounds like Wings, Chicago, Bruce Springsteen. It's not lost on me that Swan Song's logo was Icarus falling from the sky. That's exactly what happened to Zeppelin after this record. In Zeppelin's absence, Rock and Roll Babylon was about to be raided by the drug-addled, delightfully bitchy alliance of Bowie, Lou Reed, and Iggy Pop. Zeppelin's gross excess also pushed the trigger finger of punk. This album, at this time, was a risk to Zeppelin's reputation. Blemishes considered, it paid off. Should the group that practically invented rock and roll excess not be allowed to make the excessive rock and roll record? It stands today as Four's unofficial sister album, these unassailable rock triumphs. Physical Graffiti serves as a historical document, little snapshots of the biggest band of the 1970s journey to the top. It captures their fantastical glory just before the fall. This album is like visiting a Romanesque church from the 10th century, or otherwise the building on the cover. Like that church, Physical Graffiti has been here before you, and it will be here after you. My personal favorites on this one are Custard Pie, The Rover, Trampled Underfoot, Kashmir, In the Light, 10 Years Gone, and Wanton Song. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That's the redux of Physical Goddamn Graffiti! What do you think of Zeppelin? What do you think of this album? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, and a new episode of the Dolls podcast every other Friday at noon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye!